Remember this scene from Encanto? Let's make that our island entrance. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I recently started an island that will be inspired by the movie Encanto, and after preparing a mood board and planning a couple things around the island, it was now time to get to the decorating. The island will have 4 general parts: the entrance, as a reference to the bridge that we see Luisa put down, the general town, the casita, and the river where they were given the Encanto. To ensure that we would have enough room for all of the planned areas, we roughly planned the map to divide it into different sections. The entrance would be this narrow part here divided by a river that connects both river mouths. Alright, and with that, let's go. By the way, the actual decorating happened over on my Twitch channel in case you ever want to be there for the live experience. We'll start with the bridge itself. According to the movie, the best option for us will of course be the brick bridge, and I knew that I wanted the path to kind of slightly curve to the left first, so we will need to put the bridge at a good distance. We started preparing the spot for it, and once we got it to the right width, we envisioned the bridge, but decided to actually make it just like a tiny bit bigger to have more impact, or for it to be like a little bit more impressive. We once again tried it out, and even though of course we can't fully judge it in this preview, we decided to go for it. After paying it off, we jumped to the next day right away to see if it was a good decision, and once we actually decided to go with it, it is now time to work on the landscaping, or more like waterscaping around it. The basic idea, as previously mentioned, was to connect both river mouths with each other, so a good portion of the island will be left for the rest of the builds that we plan on working on at a later point in time. Judging from that reference picture, the river seems to kind of be going straight to the back for a little bit, and then might curve more towards the left, which would be our island edge. So first, I generally try to make my way towards the river mouth from the bridge, just with like a very thin river. Once I had the general direction of it down, I could then make it look more natural. A brief pause to move Isabella's house out of the way, and then it's time to get back in and work in direction from the bridge upwards to round all those sharp corners that we left behind. I also generally made the river a little bit wider, more or less like 3 tiles wide. At some point, I also decided to go to the river mouth to make that transition to the land a little bit more natural looking, and then continue to curve downwards from there to connect to the river that we'd already created before. This would kind of leave us with like a pretty narrow piece of land towards the left, which itself isn't super great, but since it was going to be mostly fillers at that point, I just decided to go with it for the time being. One thing I actually like to try and do when waterscaping is to have no edge or like curve repeat more than twice. So if I'm going the same direction 2 times in a row, I will then try to go back in and curve the next part. And I also don't really like when it looks too symmetrical or repetitive, so I kind of went back in and fixed a couple of edges. And now it is time to work on the other side of the bridge. I want to kind of bring it downwards, like towards the airport, and then according to our map plan, make it almost meet the beach at one point, and then from there, curve it towards the river mouth. So it's pretty much the same thing as on the other side. And the first step, I'll try and just make my way from the bridge to like that little beach part to have the general layout and direction of the river. And then I'll go back in to round some edges, make it a little wider in general, and add even more of those curves. In this build, I actually went back and forth to the airport a couple of times to check the entire view from there. And because I decided I wanted the river to go further down, I made just a couple of changes there, and then also kept adjusting the top part so it wouldn't turn out too wide of a river. Especially for land and waterscaping, I also like to cross-check with my map every once in a while to ensure that it's like an overall nice looking shape. And once I got to the point where I quite liked it, I then moved on to the part of the river from where it meets the beach to the river mouth. It's not too relevant for the entire entrance build, and it does go through pretty much the same steps, so I'll just mention these briefly. I started shaping the river mouth first, and then tried to connect that to the river that we already had. And then, you guessed it, time to round all the corners and make the river a bit wider in general. And so this was more or less the final result of the river on our map. Speaking of something I will just mention briefly, across the bridge I already started working on the layout of the town. Now I will go more into detail with a future town decorating video of Encanto, but since you also see this as kind of part of the entrance, I at least wanted to mention it. Because we also put down some of that flagstone pathing and a little bit of a dirt patch, and we made the decision to work with flower clusters on this island, meaning planting like a bunch of the same colored flowers in one area or like one spot, which is actually something that I used to definitely avoid before. This is kind of supposed to be a reference to Isabella making those flowers spawn. And now time to actually actually focus on some of the decorating. My first step, apart from the land and waterscaping, is always pathing. So using the dirt path that we had picked before, I started creating a path from the airport to the bridge. And because my plan here was to basically salvage those tall growing weeds, I kind of wanted the path to circle around it and go kind of left first. I also wanted to make sure that it was one long continuous path. So very similar to the previous waterscaping, I first finished the part around the airport and then went back to the other end by the bridge and prepared that ending before kind of connecting both ends together. After just a couple of fixes to make the path a smidge wider, this was the final result. In the movie, this scene or area is also where we see all those donkeys with the carts and wagons that Luisa carries around. So my plan will be to include some of the rodeo-style springy ride-ons, what a name, as donkeys, along with some covered wagons and barrels. Once again judging the view from the airport, I then tried finding a good spot for a little set of items and then went in to put a patch of pathing underneath to tie that entire display together. It already felt like one patch was not really enough, especially because I didn't want to cover just the entire area with greenery, so I added another bit of dirt to the front left as well. Let's start with a wagon with a horse, or well, donkey in the back, and then because I wanted to try and spread a couple of donkeys across the entire area, I also tried them on the front, but then quickly decided to have this more as a little storage space with wooden boxes and different barrels, and I definitely also wanted to include a garden wagon in this entrance build. I tried again with the horse donkeys further to the back, but after a bit of struggling, decided to bring them more towards the front. They ended up pretty much right in front of the airport, which also led to me shifting the garden wagon over to the left-hand side. I then realized that as you walk, you can't really see the items on the left well enough, so my decision was to shift everything like a tile or two further to the right-hand side. And now time to get some other items, such as some plants, seed bags, a wooden bucket, and some more things to add a couple more items and details to the area, and I also decided to add another covered wagon. Next up, some of those nature items. First, I tried establishing a couple of spots for trees wherever possible, depending on the waterscaping and decorating that I had already done, and the plan was to frame the area and items nicely while not covering anything. I like to actually just run around and dig holes wherever there could be a tree to judge the overall spacing, and then sometimes decorations might actually shift around in the process, like our beloved struggle horse donkeys by the airport. Speaking of horse donkeys, I also plopped another one of those by the bridge. And once I'm happy with the general tree spots, I then try and figure out which type of tree I want where. For ENCANTO, I wanted to have a mixture of obviously lots and lots of coconut trees, as well as bamboo and hardwood for general green vibes. Having a few trees planted around the very front already, I then also made some beautiful custom designs with a 2 and a 3, because they can essentially help me mark specific growth stages that I plan for certain trees. I will start spreading those around, as well as continue to plant even more trees. And then before even time traveling to check out any of the trees, I started working on a couple of those flower clusters that I mentioned earlier. I used some purple to the left of the entrance and kind of made them bleed out around it into other kind of parts, and then opted for some yellow as well as pink on the other side of the entrance to kind of create a nice contrast to the purple that we used, as well as the blue that you can see kind of in the background for the started town part. Afterwards, it was time to go back to our beloved tree game, Can This Be Tree, and continue this playing a little bit further to the back. According to the reference picture, I also wanted to try and plant a bunch of the same type of shrubs in one part. I opted for the hydrangeas, which I would like to actually hold the green starter flowers, and I also wanted to include a bunch of sugarcane as well as just a few flowers for the red accents to it. And then it was finally time to time travel for 2 days, which actually, speaking of, these are exactly the flowers that I'm talking about. I decided I liked the look of that and started adding a couple of other shrubs to the mix, as well as of course going around and stunting all the trees that we had previously marked with our beautiful custom design. Time traveling to yet again the next day, I was also now able to stunt all the trees marked with a 3, and I added a few filler coats and made a couple more tree decisions around the outside, and then I started adding glowing moss and, you guessed it, more tree decisions. Since the entire area to the back would be pretty much just fillers, I also decided I wanted to have a bit more waterscaping in the shape of a tiny little pond, so it would kind of open up this area a bit more and also make it a little bit more interesting, you know? Maybe I got distracted halfway through spreading around some potted plants and wheat fields along with filler coats and, of course, more trees before going back to the pond shaping. After yet again time traveling for another 2 days, it was time to stunt the rest of the trees and once again, more tree spot planting towards the back area, as well as planting and marking them with our beloved numbers. Since this part would actually be mostly inaccessible, I decided it should have quite a lot of trees. Having planted those, it was once again time to skip 2 days, stunt all the trees that needed stunting, and once again jump a day to stunt the rest of them, make a couple of adjustments whenever something didn't line up exactly the way that I wanted it to, and then another final time travel to look at our tree lineup. New day IRL and so much more filler stuff to do. So I basically dove right in, started getting a pocket full with different plants and rocks, wheat fields, fencing, and quite a few flowers as well as shrubs. I first like to distribute the wheat fields around with some filler coats, always in like a group of 2, and then I also incorporated glowing moss all around and added some country fencing to this area. And as you can watch me work a bit on putting around some more fillers such as shrubs and flowers, let me use the opportunity to tell you what other videos you can expect about this island. You kind of heard it at the start, but I would definitely love to edit the entire town decorating into a video. Of course, the casita build, I feel like we're all kind of anxious about that. And then also that big river part in the back. And since I work on this island on stream, pretty much everything that I do on there is documented. So I was actually planning on maybe doing an overall Encanto video once it's done, where I pretty much decorate it like start to finish. Probably be like a pretty long video, but let me know if that would be one that you would like to see maybe. Now, the amount of sugarcane that I use in this entrance decorating is a little absurd, but I truthfully felt like it was the closest to this plant that we see in the reference picture, so I really used that as basically the main filler. As special details, I also added a vase, some rocks, and potted plants, and always a couple more of those red flowers for some accents. And apart from that, it pretty much continued the same way. Wheat fields first, then shrubs and sugarcane, and last but not least, some other flower accents. And even though CJ was being really annoying during this part, we did actually finish filling this space up quite nicely, and any leftover tile was then filled with regular weeds. At the end of the stream, we also briefly time traveled and checked out the entire area with the correct shrubs and decided this might actually be quite cute. Yet another new IRL day and just a couple more open spaces, like right in front of the bridge over here, then across the river to the right-hand side and to the left. So once again, let's get to work. Very similar to how we did the previous filler parts, the first step would be figuring out some tree spots in general. So once again, I went around digging a bunch of holes. And then as we decided to have the alternating vertical board fences as a backdrop for the houses or like this town part, because the area is kind of supposed to be blocked off from the back, I also wanted to bring that all the way to the river edge. And then of course, on to deciding which type of trees to put where. Once planted with a bunch of coconut trees once again, we time traveled right away to check out and judge our decisions. After the necessary stunting and deeming it a nice bit of foliage, we once again went through the exact same steps as before. First, we spread around some wheat fields. Then I wanted some more colorful flowers and opted for a bunch of red ones this time. And then all the open spaces were then filled with a mixture of shrubs, sugarcane, and glowing moss once again. Now it would just need to grow in. And there we go. And now onto this tiny awkward space in front of the bridge. This was kind of a hard part because I wanted to fill the space but not cover the bridge at all so you could still very nicely see it from the entrance. All right, let's distract ourselves first with adding a couple of custom designs and just spreading around fillers to this very narrow piece off to the right-hand side. You know the drill, shrubs, sugarcane, glowing moss. And then to add a little bit more height to the area, I actually tried and included another little tree. And the winning combination, along with a couple more flowers, as well as, sugarcane, would be a flat garden rock, along with a butterfly model already as a reference to, mariposas, the butterflies. And there we go. Now with the entrance mostly done now, there was just this one slightly visible empty space left now. And we just kind of moved on to working on the town in general. And while doing so, we quickly established that adding a couple of fake buildings along with the pre-existing houses would hugely improve the vibe of the town. And so I also had the idea to add one to this very start of the island. It would kind of help hide this like path edge that we had, and you would also be able to see it from the entrance, which was honestly an added bonus. We built it out of a pergola and storefronts, and after a little bit or a lot of shifting it around, which I will spare you the details, we found a decent position so you could kind of nicely see it from the entrance. Now we did have to go and slightly adjust the trees that we'd already implemented, but using those as well as some barrels and of course flowers, we covered as many of the gaps as possible, or as many of the spots where you see the sky through it, because that's the absolute horror for me. Once I figured out the entire setup, it was time to add some pathing underneath and then also adjust the customization of the pergola and storefronts. And then with just a few more items around the corners of the houses, namely Monstera and Zen Cushion, we got this nice little fake building together. Which brings us to this. This is pretty much the finished entrance with the correct shrubs as well. I tried getting a day with like a few clouds. We get like the full impression of how this would probably look like in the DA. Now obviously the beaches on the side here aren't decorated, so don't pay attention to those, but you know, apart from that, we've got our main pathing leading to the bridge along with a couple of horse donkeys as a reference, and the garden wagons and everything. We've got this big river. Unfortunately, there's not a waterfall in our version just because of the like tier restrictions, I would say. And then all of this to the side is, you know, like thick foliage or filler areas, however you kind of want to call this. You can, I think, make your way through if you really wanted to. Like you could just walk in at a couple of different places. And you know, the beach will kind of be decorated with a couple of extra fillers too, but this is really mostly just to cover it up, make it look kind of like the movie and have everything filled in a way. Yeah, apart from that, we've got some barrels and boxes over here. We've got our little wagon over here, and then of course across the bridge we've got even more flower clusters and lots of colors. You know, yeah, I think like this right here is not the worst view either, kind of like that, you know. And then this does lead into the town, which as promised will be part of like another video more in detail. And then our fake building here, actually, fun fact, you can walk into it, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, apart from that, that is the entrance so far. We got lots more to do on this island, but I'm really happy with our progress. Now, do make sure that you are subscribed so that you don't miss the town or of course any of the other decorating that we are doing on this island. I do hope that you enjoyed today. Let me know your thoughts. Hello Hamlet, aka Coffee Kid. Love to see him there. Very cute. But yeah, feel free to let me know all your thoughts in the comments below, and then I hope to see you in my next video. All right, bye everyone.